Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sharon Florentine. Welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, OKRs, Friends or Foes. We have an awesome webinar for you today, as always, but I need to go through a few housekeeping items first. Just a reminder that today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. We will send an email with instructions for how to access the webinar on demand, or you can always visit us at devops.com/webinars, and it will be there for you as well. We do have some handouts available. The slides are available under the handouts tab, and if you look there in your chat, you'll see some other information that you can download there. Complimentary ebook for you, Mastering Software Delivery with VSM. So go ahead and grab those. They are really awesome reading for you. Also, we are taking questions for our panelists throughout. So go ahead and submit your questions through the Q&A tab on your console. And we are doing a drawing today for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So stick around until the end and see if you are a winner. All right. So that about does it for me. I am pleased to introduce to you today Jeff Keyes. He's the VP of Product at Plutora, Helen Beal, who's the Chief Ambassador with the DevOps Institute, and Mike Burrows, who's an author at... Whoops. Anyway, I'm going to put myself on mute and turn my camera off and turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sharon. Hello, everyone in the audience. Lovely to hear where you're all coming from. I think we've hit about 5 continents already in 6 countries, so we're quite spread out. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today, where we're going to be talking about OKRs, friends or foes. So we're going to start by talking about the origins of OKRs, so where they've come from and what do they do. We're going to be talking about how to dynamically adjust your OKRs, and we're going to talk about how ambitious they should be and what if they're overly ambitious and how to adjust your course with them. We're going to be talking about how to harness them to drive cultural change, so really changing the behaviours and what those cultural models look like that we would like to see in the particular value stream management world. And then we're really going to link OKRs and value stream management in the latter part of the discussion, where we're going to talk about OKRs and having data-driven conversations and change, so data-driven change as well. So to get started, I'm going to ask Mike to give us some background. I'm going to maybe ask him to recall a blog post that he wrote in about 2018, I think it was, which kind of mirrored some of my sentiments around that time as well. So Mike, talk us through where they've come from and why sometimes we're concerned about them.
Yeah, so the origin of OKR is at Intel and Andy Grove. So Andy Grove was visionary leader at Intel, and he wrote a book, High Output Management. I have to admit, I dislike referencing books that I haven't actually personally read, and this is one. I make that very clear. But I have read and enjoyed John Doerr's book, Measure What Matters, and why I think that's the first book that people often reference in relation to OKR is because he actually did work with Andy Grove at Intel, and what he then did was to take OKR into Google, and that's been a tool that Google themselves have used, and some of the ventures that Google have then funded or otherwise worked with John Doerr directly or other people that worked with him have then used those same ideas. So the blog post was called, what was the title? Warming cautiously to OKRs, and there's definitely some caveats there. And the reason is that OKR reminded me of something that people have warned against for a number of years. So, and that thing is management by objectives, which actually comes from a very respectable source, Peter Drucker. But Peter Drucker actually went on to disown it because what he found is that senior leaders were imposing targets on people, not caring enough about how those targets were going to be fulfilled. And, a few steps later and you're into an accounting scandal, and what actually that sort of target setting, top-down target setting does, it does invite dysfunction. People will, especially if they're rewarded for those targets, they will take shortcuts. They will find the easiest way to achieve that target without really thinking about what the best interests of the firm might be, what really the intention was behind the idea, and so on. But what I really love about OKR is that it's a way for teams to express strategy in almost the fewest number of words possible. Now, if you're a believer in team autonomy, then it's very important that teams have the ability to think about at least their part of the strategy and think about how that relates to the strategies of the levels above them, teams around them, and so on. So without getting into too much detail, we'll save some of that for some later slides. That's the origin. We will own up to there being some caution, like a lot of things actually. How you go about it actually matters. There's good and there's bad agile, for example. One of my books is actually that's what that's about: left to right and right to left kinds of agile, backlog driven or truly iterative, goal by goal, and so on. So how you go about these things does matter. Go about it in the right way, with the right attitude, with a good understanding of what the pitfalls are, and then it can work great for you. That's not to say that people won't screw it up from time to time, and some of the less successful implementations could turn out to be, quite problematic, and that's why it's very important that people are properly educated about what it's about, how it works, what can be great about it, what can be less great about it.
I think we should coin a new term of bagile.
Agile. Well, I call it left to right agile, that bad agile, but you have to understand the difference between left and right to left to get that metaphor, which is probably off topic for the moment. But we all know there are some bad implementations of agile out there, implementations that have made things worse for people, which was never the intention of the pioneers of agile. And those with a bit more knowledge can understand how that happens, and then there's a duty on any of us with any influence at all to help people understand what good looks like and what some of those dysfunctional versions of it look like and how you avoid them.
Jeff, can you tell us a bit about your personal experience with OKRs, where you first stumbled across them and your good or bad?
My personal experience with OKRs was actually not until kind of recently. I come at this whole industry from the perspective of frankly, being a haphazard engineer that I really love technology and putting bits and pieces together. And from my perspective, it was always, gosh, that's all the mumbo jumbo stuff. It doesn't really matter. It's just soft and fuzzy. In the role that I have been in over the last, stepping out of that just simple, I'm just an engineer kind of approach, I've started to, I guess, see a little bit more, especially lately, over the past, several years that I've been at Plutora, where a lot of what we do is about management and measurement. I see some things very, very differently now. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been on a prospecting call where someone comes and says, "Oh, my boss read the door, accelerate. And so we're all being comped by being able to get our deployment frequency and double it. And that's going to be the life-changing event." Or another group who's comped based upon simply, we just have to have uptime at X%. And as long as I hit that, then I get my bonus. And the downsides that creates, and inevitably the rest of the culture is focused on, if something goes wrong, then let's blame people. And it just more and more, we were just talking about this before the webinar, the idea of team health and happiness becomes paramount. And I'm surprised how often I'm hearing that. How do I measure my health? And what I'm seeing is that health is important simply because as teams have that health and can have the safety to do things change. Probably the biggest opposition to people measuring pipelines that I see in my own personal life right now of looking at the metrics of value streams and looking at what happens is purely they're worried that someone in management's going to see it. They're going to set some kind of objective saying, "Oh, that's what it is now. Well, let's improve that by X%, and then you'll get your bonus, your compensation, your whatever, or promotion." And it's just sad to me. OKRs from a different perspective, where it's not top down, is now paramount. It's like it's an expression to me of the how do I quantify my experimentation practice. So I'm a huge fan of what I'm seeing, and am interested in changing the emphasis of the industry from a management practice to an enablement practice.
And they're certainly increasingly popular. I want to make a big call out to Danielle, who's commented that she loves this topic, OKRs. Since the beginning of this month, she's applying OKRs in her team. So hopefully we can come up with some good insights for her. I also want to thank Danielle for ticking off that 6th continent. She's from Cameroon, so we now have Africa on the call as well. I don't think we'll get all 7, the 7th, of course, being Antarctica. I can't imagine there's that many iceberg research scientists that are going to be interested in OKRs, but we might surprise ourselves. There is one thing I don't think we've talked about on the slide, is we've got a subtitle, Deming versus Drucker. Mike, do you want to make a quick comment on that?
Well, Deming was one of the early, Deming, W. Edwards Deming, sort of superstar of, organization improvement, process improvement, all that stuff, from the last century, PDCA, the Deming cycle, all that stuff. He actually saw the flaws in management by objectives very early on, and said this is going to lead to problems. This is going to lead to dysfunction. If you start with targets and don't care enough about how they're done, then that's going to be a problem. And there's a sweet spot. So you've got to care about how they're done. You've got to give people the space to innovate, to find solutions, find ways of achieving those objectives. This isn't about micromanaging. And one of the challenges of leaders is to calibrate. It's to help people define objectives that are stretching, give them the space to come up with key results that are going to help deliver that objective. And take an interest in both what it is they're coming up with and how they are progressing. So, in a nutshell, that's actually what OKRs do. And you can see, described that way, that's much more a bottom-up process than a top-down process. I'd actually like to get away from top-down versus bottom-up. If the conversations are rich enough and frequent enough between levels, spanning levels and all that rest of it, then it becomes much more of a continuous dynamic thing rather than in a specific direction. But if you're going to choose between top down and bottom up is certainly the safer option. My friend Alan Kelly's book actually describes a very bottom up version of OKR. Deming, someone who's talked a lot of sense for decades, wrote some very challenging books. And if he saw a serious problem in something, then he might not be right, but I think certainly you need to take the concern seriously. And I think in this case he definitely wasn't. In the end, Drucker agreed with him, which shows that that shows the quality of that man as well.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So let's talk about, for people that maybe haven't worked with OKRs before, where do they start, Mike? How do we start?
I was just distracted by the title. Sorry, by the question. Book title, please.
Yes.
So the author is Alan Kelly with two L's, ALLAN. And for the life of me, I can't remember. Someone's going to have to look up.
I'll look it up.
You look up his book. I wrote the foreword, so that's slightly embarrassing. I wrote the foreword, so I definitely endorse the book. But just at the moment, the title of the book.
Is it Succeeding with OKRs in Agile, perhaps?
That's the one.
Succeeding. Coming your way, audience.
Yes.
Right. We'll come back to Terry's question in a minute, Mike. But if you could start us off with where do we start with OKRs, that would be great.
Yes. So OKR stands for, I've alluded to it already, it stands for Objectives and Key Results. And where it starts with is a meaningful objective. And Helen and I joke about this a lot. I use the word meaning and meaningful a lot. But I really want to stress that. So when we say 10% more isn't meaningful, what makes 10% more, or even 10% more for 5% less, what makes that meaningful is the consequences of that. Mm-hmm. If I can, if I can, I won't even talk about numbers in the objective. Some people like to, some people less keen to. There's plenty of opportunity in OKR to measure, and the key results should be measurable. You should be very clear whether you've achieved a key result or not. Many people do stress the measurability of the overall objective as well. But if it's not meaningful, then you are beginning to invite that kind of dysfunction. You are getting people to focus on the number and not focusing on what it is actually we are trying to achieve. So when you're given, if you're starting with a number, ask the question, then what happens? And from that thing, you will then get the consequence of that thing. So if it is 10% fewer servers, well, then what happens? Whatever it might be. And explore around that. Try to turn that into something meaningful. That danger is much less when the objective is something that's produced by the team itself. But if you're trying to align to a higher level objective, then the challenge there is to have that conversation. Make sure that you understand the meaning behind the intent from that you're hearing, and as far as possible, you capture the essence of that in the objective. So that's where that starts. And then the key results speak to, one other thing I should say about objectives is that they should be stretching, audacious but achievable. So two really good words that goes with that: audacious and achievable. Audacious, achievable, and then the key results that you will need to achieve along the way to achieving that objective, and those two should be stretching. And the recommendation, the practice at Intel and as recommended by John Doerr, is like a 70% chance that you're going to achieve them. At the end of the quarter, when you review progress, you won't have achieved all of them. Some of them might be 70% complete, some might be 100% complete, some might be, still some way to go. And that's not an excuse not to bother. That's an encouragement to do them in a way that's stretching. Mm-hmm. And the stretching isn't actually about making people work crazy hard. I actually think the stretch is there's something really a little bit more subtle going on. You've got an audacious objective, and you've got some stretching key results. Already you've inserted some uncertainty there, but you've got a clarity on what it is you want to achieve. You're dealing with uncertainty, and you've got the commitment to achieve it. That's actually the ingredients you need for a strategy. This is a team's chance to express its strategy very, very efficiently. And that's why I love it. I think teams should own as much strategy as they can. I don't think you can talk about teams being autonomous if strategy is just something that happens to them.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Perry's question then in the context of that. So Perry's asked, targets, objectives, KPIs, OKRs, are they really different? It sounds like all of them are metrics, and numbers need strong, morally based leadership, regardless of what you call measurement. So do we want to try and answer that? I think there's a couple of pieces to that question, really. What are the differences between all these acronyms? Are they all the same? And what's the role of leadership?
Jeff, do you want to go first?
You bet. The big things that always stuck out for me is that OKRs are the alignment of direction, and it's the opportunity for the team to say, "This is where we're going, and here's how I know that I'm, going to get there. It's as I look forward, this is what I want to achieve." Whereas KPIs are, well, show me how we're doing right now with specific aspects of what's happening. It's sort of a now and looking back versus what we look to achieve in the future is the main difference.
The clue's actually in the name, isn't it? I mean, the KPIs are about performance. They're measures of performance. You might include some health indicators in there as well, and I would actually recommend that. But key results are about what you've achieved. And it's a generalization, but it's often true that your KPIs are going to last. You're probably going to be tracking the KPIs you're tracking now. You'll probably be tracking a year from now, most of them. Whereas the key results are things that you intend to achieve in the next, whatever the period is, typically quarterly. You're definitively shooting for them, and you achieve them or you don't.
And there's a really cool part of that, the people that care about the OKRs ought to be management to see what the team comes up with as a measurement of how am I doing from a leadership perspective of getting team alignment.
Yes.
If I'm doing well, those key results are going to be music to my ears.
Absolutely.
The KPIs may be nonsensical to me as a leader.
Yes.
And that's okay, as long as people on the team can use those to say, oh yeah, I can see how the KPIs are correlating to my key results. Great.
Yes, definitely.
Shall we have a poll?
We should.
Are you out there, Sharon?
There they are.
I am, and we do, and it should be showing up for you right now. And let's see, which of these vision and goal setting management techniques are you using? OKRs, KPIs. I'm
That's
not
a big,
sure.
hairy, audacious goal, that one, your bag, you can say.
Thank you. Or MBOs, True North, balanced scorecard, none, or other. And I'm assuming please comment means put your other answer in the chat.
Certainly does. Thank
Awesome.
you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
So we'll leave that open for a couple of seconds and we'll talk a bit about where our OKRs defined. So there is your friend's book, Mike.
Good. Excellent.
Where are they defined then? I mean, we've touched on this already. So when we say where, are we meaning where in the organization or where in the process?
We had an interesting discussion even just preparing for this webinar, didn't we? Is it a team thing? Is it a value stream thing? Is it an organizational thing, departmental thing, divisional thing, and so on? And I think the answer is all of the above. And the relationships between, as I keep saying, the strategies of each of those and the alignment between them is really important. And it's actually fascinating to hear Jeff championing value stream OKRs. I was thinking very much in terms of team level upwards, but there are lots of ways of looking at organization, and managing cross-cutting concerns, managing end-to-end concerns is also really important as well. So I was really actually enjoyed hearing Jeff champion those. So we should hear it more from Jeff, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. So often it feels like in the bigger the company you are, you can sort of get lost on, I'm just doing a job, I'm just doing a project, I'm just delivering code. No, you're not. You're delivering value to customers, and frankly, software is changing the world. That's why I love this world. I did school in electrical engineering, and somehow I ended up in software because I saw the vision of what can be by the ability to rapidly change things for customers. And here we have an opportunity, each of us, to be autonomous, even in our own sphere, and say, look, let's look at the entire of whatever our value stream is and look at ways to improve it. As long as we're looking to improvement, come up with what that means. Start thinking about what is your big, hairy, audacious goal. What is your true north that you're aspiring to? What would be the target directions that would help get you there? And go through this process of creating these things.
Yeah.
It's not about working more. It's about making sure you're going in the right direction and then being able to show that you did it.
Yeah. And more than just the creating of them, if you're having the regular meetings to do the ideation and to check progress and to share the learnings that you've had and all the rest of it, you will have a better governed value stream. It's all good.
Yeah. Well, and on top of it, personal satisfaction of accomplishing what you set out to do, especially as you bring other people in, that's the world that Agile was intended to be. Decompose this into, autonomous teams that are making cool things happen.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Should we get the results of that poll? You there, Sharon? Do you want me to walk through them?
Nope, sorry, I was muted and clicked unmute, and it was not, didn't want to cooperate there. Yes, so let's see. We've got which of these vision and goal setting management techniques our audience is using. 18%, 18 of them, 33%, are using OKRs. 31% are using KPIs. Only one person is aiming for that big hairy goal. 11% MBOs, no one is using True North, 5% balanced scorecard, 16% aren't using any, and one person is using, let's see, it looks like they put their...
They did. That was 2%.
There we go.
We'll come back to that in a minute if you don't
All
mind.
right, great. Sure.
But there's some interesting stuff in there. But first of all, apologies to the audience. That was meant to be a multi-select, but kind of interesting that we forced you into picking one. My immediate responses to things on here is it's kind of concerning that 16% aren't using any kind of performance management techniques, it seems, or none of those anyway. So perhaps people that said none, if they're using something else, maybe put that in the chat. Very interesting that nearly a third of people are using both, or a third each, OKRs and KPIs. Worries me a little bit that it seems that why, so that long-term vision and goals, that orange block or bubble in the middle there, which is basically our big, hairy, audacious goal, or True North, essentially, doesn't appear to be there as well. Jeff, what was your response to those numbers?
It's surprising to me. When you have to pick one thing, what do you actually measure to? Surprising that more aren't thinking about the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's that, what are we aspiring to be? And I'm sure if you're in the land of OKRs, that's part of your process. But it's surprising to me. Ultimately, we want to do well. Well, let me go back. A conversation I had with a development leader is like, how do you measure success in your product teams? And the number one response was, well, in essence, we'll put some metrics around this, but we didn't blow up production. Okay, great. Did that change the story of where we're going? Did that change what it is that we're doing? Did that change the lives of people that add value to the company or whatever else is going on? I'm glad we didn't blow up production, but it wasn't a dramatic change. And always coming back to that direction. What is the end state that we're trying to get to? That's key. Anyways, that was my comment.
And just a couple of comments from the audience. Ginger said that they use KPIs within the OKRs to track how they're doing. I think that's the pattern we were just talking about. So that's great. Stuart, not having such a good time. No measurements being used there. Product managers are guessing what they should build based on a vague understanding of company direction instead of anything specific defined, with, unsurprisingly, a little sad face there as well. Sorry about that, Stuart. Ginger's also added our long-term vision and goals. So the company goals, which were set by the executive team, the OKRs within my group are in pursuit of those. So far we're doing pretty good. That's great to hear, Ginger. Perhaps you and Stuart could get together afterwards and share some tips on how to do this. Mike, any more comments on that before we move on to talk about those stretch goals and dynamic OKR adjustment?
Yeah, I think sometimes companies go through sort of different phases, don't they? For me, some of the most rewarding times in my career was when I was going after some what seemed stretching, audacious goals. I remember one. It was a time-critical, mission-critical project that had to be done before the euro conversion, if you can remember that far back. And we actually delivered early, and that was an extraordinarily difficult project, but also, in a strange way, one of the it's sort of painful and fun at the same time. Achieving that level of that level of achievement. And we had so much freedom in how we did it, and I think that's what made the whole thing so. The motivation was easily there because we'd come up with a solution, and we were now going to stand by that. Other times, organizations are much more about keeping things on an even keel, stabilizing, improving, those kind of things. And, at least if you've got the infrastructure in place to keep coming up with, good goals and good key results, and expect to see some innovation, expect to see some learning, then you're going to keep finding yourself in a better place. It's not always going to be super intense. It would probably be not healthy if it was super intense all the time. But let's set objectives, key results, goals that are appropriate to the season that we're in, and make sure that you've got the health indicators as well to make sure that you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're not driving performance in one direction in a way that is destroying sustainability or some other measure of health in another direction.
So we've got these audacious goals, as you say. We don't want it to be intense all the time. That's going to burn us all out. So how do we dynamically adjust these to make sure that we aren't on a constant stretch where things are, because it's very demotivating as well, isn't it, to have unachievable goals. And while you're talking, I'm actually going to pop up the next poll, I think, if I can do that. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. So yeah, tell us about how to adjust these dynamically as we are going along.
Yeah, if it's clear that it's not going to work, then you clearly have to replan, and you might have to come up with some new key results, or maybe even your objective. But changing an objective is should be a big deal. That's something that you have to negotiate with the people around you. I mean, just moving the goalposts all the time is cheating. Let's be clear about it. One way that helps is how you actually come up with those key results, and it's not just fantastic ideas that you've had, but if the key results are the result that you would achieve when you've overcome some kind of obstacle, then that keeps it grounded as well. We are now being really clear about what it is what obstacles we need to overcome. And our key results aren't just that we've solved the problem. The key results are, focused on the benefits that will accrue when we've overcome the obstacles, solved those problems, and so on. So that ensures that things are grounded in reality. And that's perhaps one thing I should have mentioned when I talked about, have you got a realistic strategy? You want a stretching goal. You want to be honest and upfront about uncertainty. You need to be honest and upfront about the obstacles that you face, and you need the commitment to have the right work happening to overcome those obstacles. If you have those ingredients, then you have a chance. If any of those ingredients are missing, if you're blasé about the obstacles, or blasé about the uncertainty involved, or the objective is completely unrealistic, then that's setting people up for failure, and that's not right. You just shouldn't be doing that.
I was just going to say too, there's such a mentality of, I set these 5 things, I must accomplish these 5 things, and if anything less than that is utter failure, can't have that. I don't think that's the goal here.
No.
When we look at these things as a team, these are stretch, and they're intended to be things that we can continuously tick off. They're estimates. By definition, estimates, half the time we're under, half the time we're over. We're never exactly on. We're making a guess. We're making a bet. Bets aren't always going to work out right. But in the process, the thing that will work out right is learning. And learning is the key. And so long as we can continuously adjust that, set them for ourselves, and learn in the process, power happens. Yes. The team dynamics and the motivation improves. And in essence, we still make progress.
Yes, and having key results with 70% confidence is actually a really smart thing. If you're only committed to things with 100% confidence, then you're only going to do the safe things. You're only going to do the boring things. You're going to set the bar very, very low, and you're going to progress very, very slowly. It's great. It allows for creativity, and it allows for failure. And that's how actually you start to create an environment where learning can happen, and that's really what this is about. It's Intel was a company known for its rate of innovation, and and this is one of the tools by which they achieved that.
Let's get some results from that poll. So,
absolutely. So, who sets your OKRs? 9% say they set them for themselves. 24% are set by the team collectively. 9% their boss. 22% the leadership team. 9% organization-wide. 26% we don't do OKRs. and another 2% are other.
So yeah, I think that's all right. We've got about a quarter not doing OKRs, which is fine. I guess they're here to think about whether to do OKRs. And then we've got nearly a third that are doing them autonomously or for themselves or for their team. And then about a third again that are probably having them inflicted upon them by their boss or their leadership team. So there's some ammunition for you to go back with, perhaps. Mike, your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think, yeah, looking at those numbers, it was only the minority where they were top down. I think bottom up just about wins there. So that's actually quite encouraging. And of course, there's a spectrum there. And what I hope for is that there are healthy conversations happening in both directions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some give and take. And a smart leader isn't going to be on the hook themselves for an objective that they know is not achievable. So the smart leader is going to be looking at what's happening in the teams and what they are shooting for, and making sure that the high level objectives are sensible from those kind of perspectives as well. In the long run, I'd like to get away from top down and bottom up, but we know that top down is where the risk is. So starting bottom up is the safer direction to start these things.
Jeff, you look like you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, you know me. I always have. There's nothing stopping any team from creating bottoms up OKRs.
Yeah.
Even if there are things not created from a top down or put in place from a top down, there's nothing stopping from additional.
Yeah, I mean, there's some longer term cultural things that have been around for a very long time in terms of personal objective setting as well. Are your objectives written for you, or do you write your own? Do you write objectives at the beginning of the year in such a way? If you're doing annual objectives, I'm not a great fan of, but just going back to realistically about career history. Do you write your start of year objectives in such a way that you leave open how those objectives are going to be achieved, or is it basically a plan for the year? There are different cultures prevail in different kinds of organizations, and it's pretty obvious which organizations are going to be more creative, which ones are going to innovate faster. The ones that think they can plan the year ahead for everybody. The idea that my manager knows what I'm going to be doing, next February, is pretty ridiculous. When I found I was on someone's project plan for 3 years from now, I was insulted. You think they're not going to be on your project in 3 years' time? You can think again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think if we're thinking about where organizations are in this world, where we're considering things like DevOps and Agile and value stream management, we're in digital disruption. So those long-term vision and goals are all probably based around managing a business through digital disruption, whether that's, to use one of my least favorite phrases, doing a digital transformation program, or one of my preferred phrases, going on a DevOps evolutionary journey. These OKRs can help drive the behaviors that we're looking for that result in what we're referring to here as the recipe for innovation. So we've talked about autonomy quite a lot. This is our bottoms up. This is about having ownership over our future, as Mike said. It's like humans don't like being told what to do as a general rule. Sometimes we're kind of beaten into a habit or a behavior where we're expecting to be told what to do, but ultimately having mastery and autonomy over our own destiny is what we prefer. And then we've got the empiricism, and this is what the key results in particular are all about. And when we're thinking about those dynamic changes, I think what's really key here is actually having access to the data. We haven't really talked about that yet. We've talked about the patterns and the models, but we haven't really talked about where all that data is coming from. But we're going to drill into that a bit more. And we have talked, I think, quite a lot about alignment throughout an organization. What we haven't, I think, really talked about so much, maybe we don't have too much time, but the more we distribute authority and the more we flatten a hierarchy, the less we need to worry about alignment, because there's not lots of layers. So just quickly, Mike, what's your view on layered organizations and cascading OKRs? Is it a strategy that people should be trying to follow and leverage OKRs in terms of removing management layers and flattening hierarchies?
You can cheat, and it's always good to be able to cheat, because this is cheating in a good way. And that is, you want some conversations that actually span levels, at least 3 levels of organization represented in the conversation. If you have that for your sort of key feedback meetings, you have that for your, for strategy meetings and so on, you are kind of flattening the organization for the duration of that workshop. And you are bringing together people who know what's really happening with people that have the authority to spend money and all those other things, set the ultimate direction of the organization and so on. And you kind of get the best of both worlds. You've got the structure, and you've got scopes where you can manage things within, but you're closely connected to the top of the organization. So you can have your cake and eat it. You can have it both ways. A completely flat organization, you've now got the chance. You've got fantastic and autonomy, but now the question is, well, what do we align to? Maintaining the coherence of the organization as it gets flatter can actually get harder. So you're always trying to strike a balance. And if you can do tricks like span levels, and so on, then you can have it both ways. You can have the best of both worlds. And I personally wouldn't start with a reorganization, for example. I would start with making sure that the right people are talking to each other, because that in the end is what we want to achieve. If the right collaborations are happening, then we're making organization less of an obstacle, and actually starting to see that the organization doesn't have to be an obstacle is actually a really cheap and easy way of addressing that obstacle. Not to say that organizations shouldn't change, shouldn't self-organize, shouldn't do all these things, shouldn't be more dynamic. I'm not saying that. But if you're letting the organization be a barrier, well, that's a barrier that exists mostly in your head.
So we've got to talk to each other more. We've got to have conversations, and these conversations need to be data-driven. So, Jeff, we've got our model now. I think we've got our organizational why, so our Simon Sinek's organizational purpose at the top. Then we've got our long-term vision, our big, hairy, audacious goal, or our true north. Then we've got our KPIs. Now we've got our OKRs. Let's talk about OKRs in the context of value stream management then. So if we've got value stream management driven metrics, we've got these 4 different classes here. Talk us through those 4 levels, starting with the customer.
Well, and we always start with the customer. Thanks, Mike. That's the right place to start. And we'd like to think about these in terms of value realization. What are we actually doing for the customer? What is the value that we bring to them? Whether that's being the amount of delight, customer satisfaction, the change that they do. What is it that we're doing for them to help provide that? Some of the key results we might talk about would be, the usage, the feedback that they might have, we can look at that and measure all sorts of things, from bounce rates on the website and so forth. On the, looks like we have another poll up, don't we?
Yeah, I just started it while you're talking, so it's very close to what you're talking about, so people can
absolutely
feel the background.
As we go down, we start to look at the business side. On the business side, it really is the reason we're in business for most of us, right? What's our adoption rate, our profitability, what's the expansion, churn, all sorts of things that come out of that I can measure and look at how the business itself is doing. As we look at that value realization, of course, we have to start thinking, well, how can we do more with what we currently have? And it becomes an efficiency conversation. The VSM class of metrics that discuss that are flow. Value stream flow metrics that look at how long it takes to push things through the pipe, from a lead time, efficiency, a throughput, work in progress, what kind of distribution. And then ultimately we can get down to team metrics of how individual teams are performing, from a capacity, what's our availability, even to like a DevOps perspective of what's our deployment frequency, what's our mean time to recover, and how long does that take? How long does it take to provision environments? How long does it take to run an actual deployment? All these things are good, and they're areas where we can use for improvement, but they always have to align back into that ultimate, how does this fit to what the customer does?
Should we see what the poll said? So the poll said, and actually it's been funny watching it adjust as it's been going through, but Flow kind of picked up, but at one point flow was the lowest percentage. It's now equal percentage with business. So great news. The leading percentage was people that are using those customer focused metrics. We're doing lots of work actually at the moment looking into exactly what those metrics are. So watch out for the value stream management consortiums. But Jeff, based on what you said, are there any surprises in that closed poll?
You know, everybody's measuring something somewhere, which is cool. How tightly they actually link to OKRs is probably the more interesting question. It's good to see that these things are discussed, at all levels. So I'm just happy that people are, looking at these things. That's my biggest joy here.
Anything from you, Mike? And
well, I'm happy to see the spread. I mean, the percentage for customer was higher than I expected, but in a good way, I think. But I do like to see the spread. Discussing things outside in is actually a good tip for both outside in strategies and established idea, but outside in service delivery reviews, for example. You can apply that same kind of thinking. Start with the customer first, then the organization, then work your way in. Is a great way to keep aligned, and a great way to make the work more meaningful. If we can demonstrate either that we are creating happy customers, or that there are things that we do need to now do to make happy customers, that's a really good motivation for the rest of the work that we're going to talk about. And I think that's a much better order than just starting with like internal capability metrics first and then working our way upwards. So there's a little tip there for your meeting agendas, and make them outside in if you can.
One of Mike's key catchphrases.
Yep.
Let's have some fun now. Let's build some OKRs. So we've got John Durr's goal formula of his OKR. So it looks fairly straightforward, right? I will, as your objective, is measured by this set of key results. So we've prepared some for you earlier. They are based on some of these metrics. So just quickly, Jeff, give us an overview of what we're seeing here. It's kind of reminiscent of what we're just looking at, but where's this come from?
Well, so part of the value stream flow metrics get into, like we were discussing, lead time, cycle time. You can look at efficiency. The metrics really break down into three basic buckets that are technical in nature or product in nature, or really you start looking at the business from an efficiency point of view. And all these are good things to take a look at.
So let's look at our first objective. So we have, I will improve customer delights. This is a customer OKR, as you can see, as indicated by usage and referrals. So those are the metrics we're going to use. And we're going to use also the 90% reduction in instance downtime, 40% acceleration into time to value or learning. This one was in the previous but one table. You may have noticed it, time to learning. The background to this is that for a long time we talked about time to market, so how long it took us to deploy a new feature or release a new feature to customers. It's an interesting metric, but it doesn't tell us much about whether that thing's actually useful. So we could be pumping out hundreds of features that nobody uses, which means we're wasting our time entirely. So we moved to talking about time to value. So in that case, we actually do understand that it's being used by somebody. So as Jeff used the phrase early on, the value is being realized. Increasingly, I'm seeing people talk about time to learning. So not only have we released that, people have got it, we're also understanding that people are using it, and we're now also receiving feedback from it. So we are learning from what we've deployed. And then finally, we've got the 95% of our service requests are solved via self-service. So Jeff, what else can you tell us about this customer-oriented, value stream management-oriented OKR example?
Well, it really looks at how do I improve what's happening from the customer's perspective. The key is, remember, from the customer perspective. One of the key things that I could go on a long time about this, but I won't. Downtime isn't super critical if the customer doesn't even notice. Just saying. Or downtime isn't critical if your mean time to repair is super, super short.
I used to work with a bank that provided credit cards, and they actually said for them downtime didn't matter at all, because the only reason they really used transactions was to request payment, and they could do it in batches. So it's very easy for them to go down an hour. It didn't matter. They just send the next batch of payment requests later.
To Jeff's point, actually, that, all of these in a way are hypotheses. It's a hypothesis that reducing downtime by 90% will result in happier customers, and for each of those other key results. But improving customer happiness is a hard thing to move. There are lots of factors that make for happy or unhappy customers, and some customers are never going to be happy. But we do need to get to know them, and the better we know them, the easier it will be to come up with good hypotheses as to what will make things better. And perhaps we'll get better at understanding what's really going on in the mind of the customer as well. So you can get more sophisticated about these things over time.
Do we look at another one? Do you want to talk us through this one, Jeff?
Sure. So accelerating throughput by 200%. Basically, I want to double my speed, right? Or double the amount of stuff through the pipe. And I want to achieve a best-in-class rating from analysts through feature delivery. And I'll measure that by 90% of our manual checks are automated, that being one of the biggest blockers in the process, or 60% flow efficiency improvement. Improving my automation and deployment steps by 90%. Those kinds of things are things you can check off on the list to improve your flow.
We might have started here with just accelerate throughput by 200%. In fact, we did. But then we worked hard a bit to make it meaningful. So the question was, then what happens? And this was I wouldn't have thought of this, best in class rating from analysts. I mean, maybe that in itself could have been all the objective that we need. But if Jeff understood, or the team understood, that there was something very specific that we were falling short on, in the eyes of analysts, then this is a very sensible objective to go for, and a very sensible set of key results.
So let's look at final OKR. So we've done customer, we've done organisation. We're going to go to team, and those eagle-eyed people in the audience will have noticed in that table earlier we had 4 rows. There was flow as well. Of course, all of these are flow-driven OKRs that we're talking about because they're value stream management driven. So this one, Mike, you can talk us through the third one, since I've done one and Jeff's done one.
Yes. So this is one where the meaningfulness of the accelerate cycle time by improving test environment availability that's going to be very meaningful for people that are close to an environment that's not as available as often as they'd like. It's incredible. It can be. I mean, Jeff said, if the customer doesn't notice, it doesn't matter. If your job depends on the availability of an environment, its lack of availability is a real problem.
Yep.
And overcoming it is something that's going to make things a lot better for you. That is something meaningful to shoot for. And you can see things here, some key results that actually speak to some different stakeholders around that. So faster provisioning is great for people who want to run a new set of tests, for example. The overall coverage might be a great one for the engineering manager. Wants confidence in the quality of the product. The development manager, might be, or delivery manager, very delighted to see, some improvements to cycle time and throughput and so on. So there's a nice spread here that's meaningful to different constituencies. And I said before about having key results that, you find them by overcoming obstacles. Well, here there's a big obstacle that's in the way of the whole team, and a meaningful objective to go for. And some great measures that are meaningful to different stakeholders.
So we've got a great question coming in from Diane, but unfortunately not much time left. Diane's actually asked, what does time to value or learning look like, and how do you measure it? So I'm going to say, Jeff, please, can we set up a webinar in the future to go deep into that? But for now, I think we're going to have to start winding down today.
Yeah, we will definitely. Just quickly, hey, what does this value stream management stuff have to do with OKRs anyways? And why is a company like Platora that's in the DevOps and digital transformation talking about OKRs? What's the point? The point is well, value stream management is all about visibility into the software factory, whether it's an individual pipeline and gaining visibility from start to end across the portfolio and looking at the dependencies, management and standardization of management across different methodologies and practices, and really implementing this system of continuous improvement. The key here is this system of continuous improvement. What Platora is we're a provider, a cloud-based solution of value stream management. That's what we are. We integrate with the tooling, pull the data in, and then have some interesting aspects. Pulling the data into a common data model that normalizes across the different tools, standardizes the statuses, the types, the priorities, it doesn't matter where your tests come from, they all get put into the same data model. It doesn't matter where your planning data comes in from, they all get put in the same data model, and so forth. What we do is we then model release pipelines, we model applications, we model environments, we model the cutover and deployment and all the activities that go along with it, and correlate this data together so that you can then take the cool part of seeing how things go. You can have out-of-box metrics that you get on dashboards, but when it comes to OKRs, we also have an enterprise class analytics engine. So you can follow your nose with any direction, because frankly, every team, every pipeline is different, and the OKRs that you'll set will be distinct. And you need a way to go set up for yourself a set of metrics for that. Now, we do have a fairly rich set of management orchestration. So we can do release orchestration. We can do a cutover orchestration as well in your journey of improvement. And the key is then coming back to the OKRs, we can then provide those, each individual team with the results of how you did. The biggest challenge we face is people are worried about, well, I don't want anybody else in my company to see my metrics. That's why this conversation is important. Every team needs to be managing their own OKRs, their own metrics, so they know what it is that their target is. Mainframe teams may not ever have a really high deployment frequency, and that may be okay. It just depends on what's happening and what metric makes sense. What Platora provides is a way, we're not an OKR system, but we'll provide all the data that you need to manage and measure the progress on that journey, especially when it comes to flow and flow metrics. That's where you're going to see a lot more from us, so stay tuned.
Good. So I think we're back to Sharon. You can just read through the takeaways. So Sharon talks us out.
Sure thing. Thank you all so much for this. I definitely feel like I understand a lot more about OKRs and why they're important. I hope you do too, audience. All right, so just a reminder that this has been recorded. If you missed any or all of it, we'll be sending an email with how to access the webinar on demand, or you can always visit us at devops.com/webinars to find this and all our other webinars for you. And all right, well, I went ahead and drew our Amazon winners here while our panelists were taking some questions. So today's winners are Paris A, Fabio M, Laura H, and Peter L. Congratulations to all our winners. We'll be sending you an email with instructions for how to claim your gift card. If you don't see that come through your inbox, please make sure to check your spam folders. And if you submitted a question today and we did not get the chance to address it, please never fear. We're going to send all of these to our panelists and they will be following up with you afterwards. All right. Well, thank you so much to Helen and Jeff and Mike. Always great to facilitate these conversations with you. And we hope to see all of you again soon on another DevOps.com webinar. I'm Sharon Florentine, signing off.